Emily Marrison from OSU Extension in Coshocton County. I serve as the Family and Consumer Sciences educator here, and I'd like to welcome you to our Dining with Diabetes cooking demonstration. So today we're going to be making a recipe about a side dish. It's vegetables, which I know some people are like, oh, vegetables, but I promise you that this is a tasty dish. We're going to be making zucchini and carrots with basil. And if you do have a garden, you might be kind of like us where you have zucchini just coming out of your ears right now. So if this isn't something that you make often, then I hope that it will be something that you can enjoy making with your family. So you can find this recipe by going to coshocton.osu.edu. The ingredients that we're going to have are, like it sounds, the zucchini and carrots, but there are also some green onions and some garlic, and then some salt and pepper. We're going to saute it in olive oil, and we'll also have a little lemon juice in there as well. And we're going to talk a little bit about some basil options. So if you don't have that recipe, you can go to, again, coshocton.osu.edu to find that. And you can also find some other resources for our Dining with Diabetes program there. So let's get started. The first thing that we're going to do is get our oil going. So we can put up our directions for that. I'm going to be using today just an electric skillet to make it a little bit easier to see, but you can certainly use your skillet on the stovetop. You want to put this on medium-high heat. And we're going to use a tablespoon of olive oil. Olive oil is a really good heart health oil. You could use canola as well. Another good thing about it is its flash point from a heat standpoint is good for sauteing, so it won't get all smoky on you. And I would encourage you to use just something that pretty much says pure olive oil rather than extra virgin. That's great for other things, but not always for when you're going to be using some really high heat. So just look for regular olive oil for that. Okay, and then as we look at our vegetables, we're going to start with the carrots just because they're the hardest. So they're going to take the longest to cook. You need about 3 carrots for this, and I've already used my vegetable peeler, taken the outside off of here. So I'm just going to chop up the rest of these. And as I'm doing that, I do have a question. I'm wondering, as you're watching, what kinds of vegetables do you typically cook in your household? I think that sometimes we can fall into a pattern of kind of making the same things over and over again. So I'm curious to know what kinds of things you usually like to make. And we'll see how many times French fries maybe shows up in our comments here. All right, so we've got our 3 carrots that are done. Got pretty good heat there, so I'm going to go ahead and put these in. Sounds good. And we'll just give those kind of a quick stir. Put our lid on, and so we'll let those cook for just a little while we work on our zucchini. And I think this recipe, yes, it calls for 3 zucchini. These are fairly sizable. Usually when you get them in the store, they're going to be just a little bit smaller than this. So just use your best judgment. I know this recipe says that it will make approximately 8 servings. And about a half cup, which is this size right here, a half cup is what you would need for a serving of vegetables. And one of the great things about carrots and zucchini, they're full of nutrients. As we talk about vegetables, we kind of have 2 categories of vegetables. One is the starchy kind, which would be your corn, peas, potatoes, right, fall into that. And then there's the non-starchy vegetables. So any of our leafy greens, think about beets and squash, all kinds of good things there. What kind of comments do we have from people about what kind of vegetables they like? What are you seeing?
seeing one, Heather said she should be eating this instead of the pizza she's eating right now.
Well, Heather, do you at least have some kind of vegetable topping on your pizza? Maybe green pepper, onion, something? We'll see what she has to say about that. Alright. So another fun thing that you can do, just to kind of change it up a little bit, is to think about what kind of shape you put your vegetables into. So I'm just sort of chunking everything up today and trying to keep things kind of the same size. But one thing that we have found recently that was kind of fun. Our steam and our oil have interacted a little there. Start our zucchini here. And it's smelling really good. Just a little bit. And, oh, and a few more here. And then the next thing we're going to add is our green onion and our garlic. But first I wanted to show you. So we recently, it has these really cool suction cups which are sticking to the counter right now. We recently got this vegetable spiraler so you can make noodles with it. So it's a pretty cool little tool. We've actually been having some zucchini spaghetti this week. Made it one day and had some salmon over it, and made it another day more like spaghetti, like with spaghetti sauce. It's pretty easy to cook this up as well because it's so thin, it doesn't take long to cook. And it's just something a little bit different. So it might be something that you consider doing or trying out. And of course that would work for other vegetables too. It could work for our carrots in this case. We could have done more of like a julienne cut for these rather than chunking them up. So sometimes that can make things a little bit fun as well. Okay, we're going to put in our green onion now. And I'm going to set this off to the side. And then we're going to add in our clove, or our garlic clove. Now for this you've got some different options. You can always go with the real deal and just peel off from your whole garlic head, the clove of garlic. You could also use garlic powder, and in the recipe there's a little, it tells us that 1 clove of garlic minced would be the same as about 1/8 of a teaspoon of garlic powder. I will tell you though, my favorite is to get the jar that's already minced. We use a lot of garlic in our house, and it seems like though we use a lot, I always have garlic that goes bad as well. And so this way I keep it in the refrigerator and I don't have to worry about it going bad. And a clove of garlic is about 1/2 teaspoon. So we're just going to take 1/2 teaspoon here and add this in. So we're adding in some ingredients now that are giving it more flavor. One of the things that is so easy for us to do when we want to add flavor to something is to put salt on it, right? Because salt does enhance flavor. It does bring out flavor in savory dishes for sure. But one of the things that we want to watch for those of us that are managing diabetes is our sodium intake. So it can also just help with our weight management as well. So looking for other options besides salt. Now that doesn't mean that we don't add any salt at all, but we're just going to add maybe less because we've got these other flavors that are going on. So in this case, we've got 1/4 teaspoon of salt, pepper, lemon juice, and basil. But we're gonna make sure that this zucchini. You can see it's starting to get some grill marks on there. Which is adding, because there are sugars that are in this, right? There are carbohydrates that are in vegetables, just not as many as we would have like in fruits. So those sugars in the carrots are starting to brown, and that gives it kind of that caramelized flavor as well. So I'm going to turn my heat down, and I'm going to add in my salt. So we're looking at 1/4 of a teaspoon of salt. And it calls for the same of pepper. I'm a big fan of grinding my own pepper. You can certainly get the already ground black pepper, but I think sometimes with the bigger chunks like this, it also helps to add more flavor. And really the hope is that if we have a lot of flavor in our food, that we'll take the time to really enjoy it, right? And really be mindful of what we're eating. And that can make a huge difference as well. One of the things that often goes hand in hand, not always, but those that are trying to manage their diabetes are oftentimes trying to lose weight as well. And doctors will tell us that even a 10% reduction, if you are overweight, a 10% reduction in your weight can make a huge difference in your blood glucose levels and your overall health. So it doesn't have to be a tremendous amount of weight that you're trying to lose, but even 10% of your body weight can make a huge difference. So the last thing we're going to add in here at the very end is our basil. And I have a few different kinds of basil that I wanted to share. I've been growing these in a container outside of our house. This one is a cinnamon basil. And the cool thing about basil is that if you rub the leaves, then you can smell that aroma from the oils that are in the leaves. So this one is cinnamon. Then this is more the traditional sweet basil. Just has a very basil-y smell. Pretty much smells a lot like basil. And this one is kind of cool. It's lemon basil. So it smells just very citrusy. And since we do have some lemon juice that we're going to add to this, I'm going to use a little bit of our lemon basil and then some of the sweet basil. And one thing that I am a huge fan of is kitchen shears. If you're really good with a knife, then you just go for chopping this up with the knife. I love being able just to cut it up really quick. So I encourage you, if you do have kitchen shears and you don't use them very often, trimming your herbs like this in order to use them in a recipe is a very convenient way to use your shears. So we'll get this basil in here, and then we'll toss in a little bit of our lemon juice just to add some acid. Again, just adding lots of flavor to this, because we just don't want like a mushy mess of vegetables, because that's certainly not appetizing. It's not going to encourage us to eat our vegetables. And our last thing, we've got our teaspoon of lemon juice. And definitely if you have lemons around your home that you're using for other things, I did have some lemons in my house, but I have a little girl who just made some lemonade this week, so all my lemons are gone. But this is just the same as using a real lemon. Having that in your fridge is a convenient thing to have. All right, so we will toss all of these. And this smells, for vegetables, pretty good. And I love the color in it too. Lots of bright color. I'll tell you, I'm a tomato fan, so you put a little red tomato in there, and that would also make it look very appetizing as well. All right, so that is our recipe for today. One other thing I wanted to talk with you about, just quickly. Anybody else share any vegetables that they're a big fan of?
Oh, Heather had cheese on her pizza, and Brian Raisin said, "Love this, healthy food rocks."
Hey, Brian. Good to hear from you. Okay, so I just want to talk a little bit about portion size. We'll talk about that over the next 3 weeks as well, because it's something I try to work on myself, especially over these last 4 months. It's been a lot easier to have larger portions of things. And one thing that you can do is to kind of try to trick your mind a little bit. It is amazing what the size of your plate can affect on how much you're eating. So think about what the size of your plate is that you typically use for a meal in your home. Years ago, if you would look at place settings from like 50 years ago, the size of the plate was not nearly as large as we have today. And if you go out to a restaurant and you see the size of plates, they are oftentimes this size or even larger. So I encourage you, if you do have what we would probably call a salad plate, more of like a 9-inch size plate, I encourage you to use that. And then as you have it full of food, it looks like you're eating more, feels like you're eating more, and you're not encouraged to fill up the larger size with too large of a portion. And as you are putting your meal together, this is another thing that I'd like for you to think about over this next week. I want to encourage you to think about, can you do it at that one? Think about making half of your plate vegetables, and especially non-starchy vegetables. So the things that are not corn, not peas, not potatoes. Then a quarter of your plate can be whole grains or starches. Okay, so some of those starchy vegetables, or especially whole grains. And then the last quarter of your plate is for lean protein. So meat is fantastic for that, lean cuts of meat especially, but there's also other proteins as well. We don't often as Americans eat a lot of beans, and there's some great beans that are out there that are delicious. So we'll talk more about that over the next few weeks as well. But as you think about your plate, these are the proportions that will help us manage our diabetes better. We also could have some milk or low-fat yogurt, could be low-fat cheese, so some kind of a dairy product, or we could also have some fruit as well. So as we look at those different things that we could have in our meal, the dairy and the fruit and our starch down here, those are all going to cause blood sugar to go up. As we look at our protein, it could go up a little. And we look at our non-starchy vegetables, that's going to help us to maintain. So a balance is a really important thing, especially if we have some fiber that helps to lengthen out how our body is reacting to that, those carbohydrates that we're putting into it. That can really help us to maintain our diabetes better. Okay, so that's my encouragement for you this week. My challenge to you is to see when you eat your meals if you can get half of your plate to be those non-starchy vegetables. And this would be one great way to do it, but there's plenty of others. This is a great time of year because things are coming out of the garden, and if it's not coming out of your own garden, it could be from a farmer's market or from the grocery store. There are just lots of things to choose from. So I hope to see you right back here next Tuesday at 7 o'clock p.m. and we'll be making stir fry next week. So until then, have a great week.